Hi everyone, my name is Esmeralda Martell and this is my Raspberry Pi final project for CNIT 176. I did the RAID array and web server, and this is just basically me building a web server that runs WordPress and stores its files on a RAID 1 array. And I just did this using 2 USB flash drives, and this project overall just helped me explore server hosting, learn new Linux commands, and just like have redundant storage. And I did all of this just using my Raspberry Pi and the 2 flash drives. So going forward, we have the business case. So I just chose this project because I felt like it was useful and realistic. And the RAID 1 setup, it just keeps a backup like of all files automatically. So if one drive fails, then nothing is lost. And uploading the content is simple with the WordPress interface. So it's more on the beginner friendly side. Setting everything up was very beginner friendly, and it is also very budget friendly. You can expand it with more drives. If you get like a 16 GB drive, it is not that much. It's like probably like $4 max. And it's just ideal for small teams or personal projects that need to be mirrored, and it combines storage reliability with an easy to manage web platform. So even as students, like this could be an ideal case for like having maybe your student portfolio. But overall, this is just beginner friendly and very budget friendly as well. So next we have the connection to Pi architecture. So first we have some input and outputs. So the USB ports on the Pi, they were used to connect two 16 GB flash drives that I had. These ended up becoming my RAID 1 array. These acted as storage devices, and they just showed how the Pi handles like external peripherals. So these were just good for storage. And then second, we have the memory and storage. So the RAID setup adds reliability to the Pi secondary storage and spreads data across 2 drives. So the OS is on the SD card, and while WordPress files and uploads, they're stored on the RAID. So this setup like just separates primary and secondary storage and just mirrors how larger servers handle boot drives and storage drives. And then next we have the Ethernet port. This one is very basic. This just gave the Pi internet. It's what gave me access, and it also just allowed me to stay connected to like my Pi like network, I guess, throughout the whole thing. This is just very simple. I feel you probably know what this is because it's just something that most PCs have. And then we also have GPIO pins. So I did not use these, but it's something that could be added later on. Like you could add extra indicators like LEDs to show like your RAID or web server status if expanded later. This is a little bit more on the complicated side, but GPIO support shows just how the Pi can act as both a server and a hardware controller. And just the GPIO pins are just overall very important because they act like as a physical interface, and these pins are basically like what allows the Pi to like interact with the external world. So they're just very important to the Pi architecture. But next we have our procedure steps. As you can see, we have 6. First, we just have we have ranges from installing to setting up to unmounting and configuration, and then creating the RAID array and then installing once again. But I'm going to dive into these deeper later on. So first we have the Apache 2 installation and testing. So this was very simple to do. All I had to do was sudo apt install into the Apache 2, as you can see up here. And then once I had a new line command, I knew that I had installed and it was ready. So to check this, I just went into the web browser and I typed localhost into the browser, and then I got this. And then if you get this web page, then that means that you have done it correctly, and if not, you may need to troubleshoot and figure out where you went wrong. Following, we have the installation of PHP, Maria database, and WordPress. So actually these three go hand in hand. The PHP actually lets WordPress run, and then Maria database stores the data, sorry. And so these were also easy. It was just sudo apt install, allowing it to go. Maria database did need a bit of configuration. I had to go through some of the settings, like clicking yes and then making sure that it stayed written out. And then for WordPress, it was also very simple. Just had to sudo, go through that steps. It was very simple. And then at the end, I just needed to reboot. And then going forward for the WordPress creation and setup, this part actually messed up my pie overall. It was not good for me during this part, but this part does create a lot of needing for troubleshoot just because of the reboot part. For the WordPress database, I granted access by using the MySQL roots, and then I did this inside the terminal. And so then once everything was set up to be able to reboot, I then rebooted. And then because I went through a lot with this, I actually lost my screenshot that I had for setting it up. But for setting it up, I did have to run some more longer Linux commands. These just made sure that everything was set up good so that I would be able to raid into it later. But this part was definitely one of the most challenging parts of this overall project, just because of the troubleshooting. And then I actually had to restart because it just was not working out for me. There would be problems within my flash drives, which was later on in the project. But for this, there would be problems with the rebooting, and then I was locked out of my Pi, and then it was just a cycle of having to go over and over again. So this was one of the more technical parts of the project. It was actually one of the hardest, so I take back what I just said. This was definitely the hardest. I definitely had the most trouble. As you can see, I had to keep trying to troubleshoot and redo, and I had a lot of spelling errors here. So before I could even build on any of the RAID array, I had to prep both USB drives, and then for this I just used umount to make sure nothing was mounted, and then I ran the fdisk on each one to delete any old partitions and make new ones. And then you can see the terminal that I chose to set. I chose the defaults for the partition setup, and then I wrote the changes. You can see this, and then it's just important to do this step right, especially because if you don't get this wrong, then your whole website will not be working. So and also because the RAID creation would just fail later. And you can also see that I edited the Apache configuration here to change. So yes. So I moved everything to the RAID mount, and then I tested it in the browser, as you can see here. And then it showed my blog page, so I knew it was working. And then moving on to the RAID array. So I created the actual RAID 1 array here. So I installed it. So what I installed was the MDA DM by using the apt command, and then I used the command to build a mirrored array from the 2 USB drives. And you can see the command here with the dev SDA1 and dev SDB1. So these are actually my flash drives. And so then once the array was created, I formatted it with the ext4, as you can see. And then I mounted it at the mount and then RAID 0. And then made the mount a point. And then one of the tricky parts about this was just editing the /etc fstep file to make sure, because when my Pi broke, I could not find it at all when I tried troubleshooting it through a different computer and different source. So yes, I switched to using the UUID, and it fixed the boot issue later on. And so then I have the lost and found directory. So once the RAID was mounted, I checked it using ls, and then the only thing there was lost and found. So this shows that the ext4 file system, that it was basically made correctly, and so this folder is just automatically made. So if the folder is there, then it means the RAID is mounted and working. And so then after the RAID was confirmed, I logged into WordPress through the browser, and then these screenshots just show like everything. Like this is the dashboard and the user. And so then at this point I was just able to like be like a regular and show that that all of it was just like being stored and mirrored in RAID array if I decided to post something. And so the next we have troubleshooting. So here it was just a lot of no such file or directory, no such file or directory. So I just kept having to restart, and make sure I had no spelling errors. And this is actually when I was making this. So as you can see, majority of this is from this. So it was forbidden and I could not figure it out. So I actually had to end up wiping everything and restarting. As you can see, this is me restarting. And this is me finally getting everything and wanting to reboot, and then having to basically I got kicked out of my Raspberry Pi, and then I had to go get a micro SD card reader and fix it from there. And so this was just a very great learning experience. And then next, my lessons learned are to carefully read instructions. I messed up so many times because of this, especially when saving files. I would just save it as whatever instead of as what it asked me to. And then I learned it's okay to restart. Sometimes restarting is the best option, because if you just continue with the mess of, Linux commands you have, then it's just gonna be bad and it's not gonna work in the end. And the next is plan ahead. I definitely did not plan ahead and give myself enough time, because I kept running into errors. Even though I thought I had already finished, I did not truly finish, and then that's when all the errors decided to hit me at once. So these are my biggest 3 lessons learned this time, and I recommend you guys to please take me as an example. And thank you.